The restaurant was too bright, too loud, and far too public for what was unfolding. Aisha Rahman sat frozen in her chair, fingers curled tightly around the stem of her water glass. Her smile locked in place while every instinct inside her screamed to run. Across the table, Daniel was leaning back with the smug comfort of a man who thought he was winning something, his voice carrying just a little too far. "So," he said, grinning, "I just think it's strange you didn't mention you live alone. I mean, that kind of independence can be intimidating for some men." Aisha felt heat crawl up her neck. A few heads from nearby tables turned, curiosity sharpening their glances. She laughed weakly, the sound not quite reaching her eyes. "I do not see how that is relevant," she said carefully. Daniel shrugged, lifting his beer. "I'm just being honest. I prefer women who are a little more flexible, more traditional. You seem very focused on your career. Makes a guy wonder where he fits." She stared at him, stunned. This was supposed to be dinner. One polite evening to satisfy her mother's relentless matchmaking and prove, once again, that she was trying. Instead, she was being evaluated like a poorly performing intern in front of an audience. "I think," she said slowly, "that is something you ask privately and kindly." Daniel chuckled. Actually chuckled. "Relax. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking." That did it. The pressure behind her ribs snapped. She pushed her chair back, the scrape loud against the floor. "Excuse me," she said, standing. "I need to." She never finished the sentence. "Babe." The word landed like a drop plate. Aisha turned, her heart lurching violently, and nearly collided with a man who had appeared out of nowhere. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal jacket that looked expensive without trying too hard. His hair was slightly mussed, as if he had run a hand through it one too many times. His eyes, dark, steady, unreadable, locked onto hers with unsettling confidence. "There you are," he continued, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "I have been calling you." Her brain short-circuited. "I what?" she whispered. He smiled down at her, warm and apologetic, then leaned in just enough that only she could hear. "Play along. Trust me." Before she could object, his arms slid around her shoulders with practiced ease. Not possessive, protective, like he belonged there. Daniel stood abruptly. "Who the hell are you?" The man did not even look at him at first. He focused entirely on Aisha, brushing his thumb lightly against her arm, as if grounding her. "I'm sorry I am late," he said, genuinely regretful. "The meeting ran long." "Meeting? Late? Babe." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Then he finally turned to Daniel, his expression shifting, not angry, not aggressive, just calm in a way that made the air feel thinner. "And you must be?" he asked. Daniel scoffed. "I am on a date with her." The man blinked once, slowly. "No, you are not." A few people openly stared now. A server froze mid-step nearby. Daniel's face flushed. "She did not mention a boyfriend. She does not owe you her life story," the man replied evenly. "Especially not when you are interrogating her like that." Aisha's breath caught. She had not told him anything. He had simply seen. Understood. Daniel laughed again, sharper this time. "This is ridiculous." "It is," the man agreed. Then he looked at Aisha, his voice softening. "Are you ready to go?" Every rational part of her mind told her this was insane. She did not know this man. He could be making things worse. But then she looked at Daniel, at the watching crowd, at the humiliation crawling over her skin. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "I am." The man nodded, as if that settled everything. He guided her toward the exit, his hand firm and reassuring at her back. As they passed Daniel, the man paused. "One piece of advice," he said politely. "If you want women to stay seated, you might try respecting them." The restaurant exhaled as they walked out. The night air hit Aisha like freedom. She stopped just outside the door, heart racing, adrenaline buzzing through her veins. The man released her immediately, stepping back to give her space. "I am so sorry," he said. "I hope that was not out of line." She stared at him, still catching her breath. "You just caused a scene that made me want the ground to open up and swallow me." His mouth twitched. Then I definitely overdid it." Despite herself, a laugh escaped her. Small, shaky, real. But she added, "You also rescued me." His smile softened. Good. That was the goal. She studied him properly now. Up close, he looked even more composed, the kind of man who was used to being listened to. There was something deliberate in the way he held himself, like he understood space and timing. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I am Aisha." "I know," he said. Her eyebrows shot up. "You do." He lifted a hand quickly. "From the community fundraiser last winter. You spoke about urban housing design. I was in the back. You were memorable." "Oh." She blinked, caught off guard. She remembered that night. Remembered seeing him, actually standing near the exit, talking to someone important looking. She had dismissed him as just another donor. "You are," she started. "Evan," he supplied. "Evan Hale." The name clicked, and her stomach flipped. Hale Group. Real estate. Infrastructure. One of the city's most influential firms. She stared at him. "You did not have to do that. You barely know me." He shrugged lightly. "I knew enough." Silence settled between them. Not awkward, just charged. From inside the restaurant, Daniel's voice rose again, muffled but angry. Aisha winced. Evan glanced at the door, then back at her. "Can I walk you somewhere safer? Or call you a car?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Walk with me." They moved down the sidewalk together, the city humming around them, the echo of the scene still vibrating in her chest. She had gone to dinner expecting nothing. Instead, a stranger had stepped into her humiliation without hesitation and changed the course of her night. Aisha did not know it yet, but that scene would follow her for the rest of her life. They walked in silence for half a block. Not the awkward kind, no frantic searching for words, no pressure to fill the space. Just the steady rhythm of footsteps and the low hum of traffic, like the city was politely giving them room to breathe. Aisha was the first to speak. "You did not have to walk me," she said, glancing sideways at Evan. "I would have been fine." He smiled faintly. "I know." That answer irritated her more than it should have. "Then why insist?" "Because people are usually fine right up until they are not," he replied. "And because I interrupted your evening. The least I could do is see it through." She huffed a quiet laugh. "You have a very inconvenient sense of responsibility for a stranger. Only when the stranger deserves better." That stopped her. She slowed slightly, forcing herself not to read too much into the words. Men said things, especially confident ones, especially men like Evan Hale, who probably negotiated million-dollar deals before lunch and still had time to rescue women from bad dates before dinner. They reached a corner where the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Aisha folded her arms loosely, more out of habit than cold. "So," she said, "do you often pretend to be someone's boyfriend in public restaurants?" "Only on odd-numbered Thursdays," he deadpanned. She snorted despite herself. "Liar." "Fine," he admitted. "First time. Lucky me. Or unlucky," he said, "depending on how you rate the performance." She glanced at him again, catching the hint of amusement in his eyes. "You were very convincing. I had a good partner." Her chest tightened at that, an unexpected, uncomfortable reaction. She cleared her throat. "You said you remembered me from the fundraiser," she said, steering the conversation somewhere safer. "I am surprised. That room was full of important people." "Yes," he agreed. "And you were the only one talking about people who never get invited into rooms like that." She blinked. "You listened." "I did." The sidewalk narrowed as they approached her building. Aisha slowed, reluctant in a way she did not fully understand. The adrenaline from the restaurant had faded, replaced by something quieter, heavier. "That man," she said suddenly. "Daniel. He is not usually like that." Evan arched an eyebrow gently. "You sound like you are defending him." She frowned. "I am not. I do not like scenes." "Neither do I." "Then why create one?" He stopped walking. She stopped too, turning to face him. Up close, his calm felt intentional, like he chose it carefully. "Because sometimes," Evan said, "quiet endurance teaches the wrong people that their behavior is acceptable." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. Not like that. Not without making it feel like advice or a lecture. "I'm used to letting things go," she admitted. "It is easier." "For who?" The question landed softly and hit hard. She looked away, exhaling slowly. For everyone else, Evan nodded once, as if that confirmed something he had already suspected. They stood there for a moment, the space between them charged but respectful. He did not step closer, did not reach for her again. That restraint felt louder than any bold move would have. "This is me," she said finally, gesturing to her building. "Good," he said. "I am glad." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you, again, for stepping in. You do not owe me gratitude for basic decency." She smiled, small and sincere. "Still, thank you." He returned the smile, softer now. "You are welcome, Aisha." She turned toward the entrance, then paused. "Evan, yes. You said you knew enough about me to step in," she said. "What did you mean?" He considered her for a moment, then answered honestly. "I saw a woman being made smaller in public," he said, "and I saw someone who deserved space, not judgment." Her chest warmed in a way that felt dangerous. "I hope," he added, "that if our roles were reversed, someone would do the same for you." She nodded, unable to trust her voice. As she walked inside, she felt his presence linger. Not following, not watching, just there like a steady line she could trace back if she needed to. Up in her apartment, Aisha locked the door and leaned against it, pressing her palm to her racing heart. It was ridiculous. She had known him for less than 30 minutes. He was powerful, polished, completely outside the careful life she had built. And yet, as she replayed the night in her mind, the calm voice, the protective hand, the way he'd seen her without asking permission, one thought refused to leave her. Some encounters were brief, others were beginnings, and Aisha had the unsettling feeling that Evan Hale was not done walking into her life. Aisha did not expect to see Evan Hale again, which was precisely why her stomach dipped when she walked into the conference room at 9:30 Monday morning and found him standing at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, jacket draped neatly over a chair like he owned the space. Because he did. "Good morning," he said calmly, meeting her eyes across the room. For half a second, neither of them moved. Then professionalism snapped into place. "Mr. Hale," Aisha said, steadying herself as she took a seat, flipping open her notebook. "I did not realize Hale Group would be attending today's review." Evan's lips twitched, just barely. "Evan is fine, and this project is important to us." Of course it was. The Riverside Redevelopment Initiative had been her proposal. 12 months of research, late nights, community interviews, revisions stacked on revisions. Affordable housing with dignity. Mixed-use spaces that did not erase the people who already lived there. And now the city had invited Hale Group to partner. Aisha straightened her shoulders. Whatever had happened outside that restaurant was irrelevant here. The room filled quickly. City planners, finance reps, legal advisors. Conversations overlapped until the department head cleared his throat. "As you all know," he began, "this initiative requires private investment. Hale Group has expressed interest in funding and managing development." Aisha's pen paused mid-sentence. "Managing?" She glanced at Evan, who was already listening intently, hands folded, attention focused on the presentation slides. The meeting moved briskly. Budget projections, zoning challenges, risk mitigation. When it was her turn, Aisha stood and presented with controlled confidence, her voice steady as she outlined her vision. "These buildings are not just structures," she said. "They are homes, stability, continuity. If we treat this as a profit-first endeavor, we will repeat the same mistakes that displaced these communities in the first place." A murmur rippled through the room. Aisha finished and sat. Silence followed. Then Evan leaned forward. "I agree," he said simply. Every head turned. He continued, "Hale Group has made money building high-end developments. We're very good at it. But we are also aware that this project will fail if we ignore the people it is meant to serve." Aisha's pulse quickened despite herself. "Our interest," he added, "is long-term. Sustainable neighborhoods are not charity. They are smart investment. We want to fund the project without stripping it of its purpose." The room shifted. Pens scratched faster. Interest sharpened. The department head nodded, visibly relieved. "That is encouraging." Aisha stared at her notes, then up at Evan again. Their eyes met briefly. There was no smile, no familiarity, just respect. After the meeting, she packed her bag quickly, determined to leave before things became awkward. No such luck. Aisha, she paused. Yes. Evan had approached quietly, careful not to corner her. May I walk with you? In what capacity? She asked coolly. He smiled at that. Two professionals discussing a shared project. She considered then nodded. Fine. They moved down the hallway together. I did not know you worked with the city, he said. And I did not know you liked affordable housing, she replied. He chuckled softly. I like good ideas. Yours is one. Do not patronize me. He stopped walking. She stopped too, annoyed with herself for snapping. I'm not, he said seriously. If I were, I would not be here. The sincerity in his voice unsettled her more than flattery would have. There is a line, she said carefully, between what happened the other night and this. I need to be clear about that. I agree, Evan said immediately. Completely. Relief flickered through her. I will not cross it, he added, unless you invite me to. Her breath caught. That was a joke, he said quickly. Mostly. She shook her head, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. You are dangerous. I've been told. They reached the lobby. Sunlight streamed through the glass doors, bright and exposing. Thank you, she said after a moment, for supporting the project. Thank you, he replied, for reminding me why I wanted to. She turned to leave. Aisha, he called softly. She looked back. Dinner, he said. Not a rescue this time. No audience. Just a conversation. She hesitated, long enough for him to add, You can say no. She studied him. The composure. The restraint. The man who had stepped in without asking and now asked without pressure. Yes, she said finally. One dinner. His smile this time was genuine. Unguarded. Friday, he asked. Friday, she agreed. As she walked out into the city, Aisha felt the ground shift beneath her careful plans. This was no longer a chance encounter. It was the beginning of something complicated. And for the first time in a long while, she was not sure she wanted simple. Friday arrived faster than Aisha expected. She told herself it was because the week had been busy. Site inspections, zoning calls, revisions to the Riverside proposal. But the truth was harder to ignore. She had been aware of the date in a way that felt uncomfortably like anticipation. Dinner was at a small, understated restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a florist. No valet, no white tablecloths. When Aisha arrived, Evan was already there, standing just outside the entrance, checking his watch. You're early, he said. So are you, she replied. He smiled. Fair. Inside, the lighting was warm, the noise low enough for conversation. As they were seated, Aisha felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. This felt intentional, chosen. I almost suggested somewhere more formal, Evan admitted as they looked over the menus. Then I remembered how much you dislike being evaluated in public. Her eyes lifted sharply. I did not say that. You did not have to. She exhaled, half amused, half unnerved. You are observant. Occupational hazard. They ordered. Wine for him, sparkling water for her. So, Aisha said, folding her hands together, what is this? Evan did not pretend to misunderstand. This is dinner. She raised an eyebrow, and he continued, a chance to get to know each other without pretending to be anything we are not. No roles, she said. No power plays. Agreed. Complete honesty, she added. He hesitated only a fraction of a second. As much as we can manage. That honesty felt like a warning. Conversation flowed more easily than she had expected. He spoke about growing up in a household where success was measured loudly and often, where failure was treated like a moral flaw. She told him about her parents' immigration story, the pressure to be grateful, to be exceptional, to never complain. Independence, she said quietly, was not encouraged. It was earned. He studied her. You carry it like armor. And you carry control like a shield, she countered. He laughed softly. That obvious? To someone who has had to read rooms to survive, she said. Yes. The food arrived, grounding them. For a moment, they ate in companionable silence. Then Evan said, I should tell you something. Her fingers tightened around her fork. "All right, I am considering taking a role in Boston," he said. "Temporary. 6 months. Maybe longer." The words landed harder than she expected. "Oh," she said carefully. "Congratulations." "Thank you," he replied. "Nothing is decided yet, but it is likely." She nodded, forcing calm. They had known each other for days. This should not matter. "And yet, I wanted you to know," he continued, "because I do not want to start something without being honest about where my life might be headed." "Start something." The phrase lingered between them. "I appreciate that," she said after a moment. "Truly. But," he added, "I also did not want to walk away from this without exploring it." Her chest tightened. "This feels like terrible timing." "It usually is," he said. The waiter cleared plates, breaking the intensity. Aisha took a sip of water, gathering herself. "Evan," she said slowly, "I do not do uncertainty well." "I know," he replied. "Neither do I. I just hide it better." That earned a reluctant smile. Outside, the night air was cool. They stood beneath the glow of the streetlight, neither quite ready to leave. "I'm glad we did this," Aisha said. "So am I." Silence stretched, comfortable, dangerous. He did not reach for her, did not step closer. The restraint pressed heavier than any touch. "Good night," she said finally. "Good night, Aisha." She turned, took 3 steps, then stopped. "This," she said without looking back, "does not have to be the last time." His voice came warm and steady behind her. "I was hoping you would say that." She walked away before he could see her smile. But as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, one truth settled firmly in her chest. Feelings had entered the room, and they were not asking permission. The weekend arrived, bringing with it a nervous energy that Aisha could neither ignore nor contain. She had been thinking about Evan constantly since their dinner, replaying his words, his half-smiles, the way his eyes lingered just a second too long when he spoke. Every memory carried a weight she hadn't anticipated, like a melody she could not stop humming. Saturday morning, the city seemed quieter somehow. She stood in her apartment, scrolling through emails but barely seeing them when her phone buzzed. "Evan, coffee? Now." Her heart jumped. "Now?" She glanced at the clock. 10 minutes. She barely had time to breathe, much less plan, yet a thrill of anticipation swept through her. She typed quickly, "On my way." By the time she reached the small cafe on the corner, Evan was already there, leaning casually against the railing outside, his hands stuffed into his coat pockets. The winter air tugged at his hair, but he smiled when he saw her. That smile, bright, disarming, full of something she could not yet name, made her stomach twist. "Morning," he said, brushing imaginary lint off his sleeve. "Morning," she replied, trying to sound composed. They ordered coffee and wandered down a quiet street, boots crunching in the early frost. The conversation started small. Weekend plans, the state of the city, the latest architectural news. But the undercurrent of tension between them made every glance and laugh electric. At a small park, Evan stopped. "I'm glad we're doing this," he said quietly. Aisha tilted her head. "Doing what?" "This." He gestured vaguely at them, at the crisp air, at the space between them. "Being honest. Being here. Not pretending we don't feel anything." She felt herself flush. "It's complicated," she admitted. "It's always complicated." "No," he said softly. "It doesn't have to be. We make it complicated." She laughed, a sound that startled even her. "I think it's complicated because you're terrifyingly charming." He tilted his head, mock offense crossing his features. "Terrifyingly? Absolutely," she said. "You make it impossible to stay casual." He stepped closer, the distance shrinking until she could feel the heat radiating off him. "Good," he murmured. Her breath hitched. The winter air no longer mattered. It was him, only him, pressing closer, closer. And then, before she could second-guess herself, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, lingering, his hand tracing a line down her jaw. "Evan," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just let me." And she did. The first kiss was tentative, testing, like 2 careful architects mapping unknown territory. But the second was urgent, consuming, a confession in itself. hands tangled in coats and scarves, hearts racing in unison. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Aisha realized she could no longer remember what had come before this moment. "This is insane," she said, laughing softly. "Totally insane. Perfectly insane," he corrected, a grin tugging at the corner of his lips. For hours they walked, talked, and laughed through the streets of the city. Nothing felt ordinary. Every glance, every brush of skin, every shared smile was charged with the weight of unspoken admissions. The world had shrunk to just the two of them, and yet paradoxically, it felt infinite. That night, Evan invited her back to his apartment. Neither said the words out loud, but the intent was clear. The moment they stepped inside, the tension that had been building all week snapped, and they were closer than ever. The kiss in his doorway was electric, leaving Aisha trembling in a way that made the rest of the world fade to gray. "I've been wanting to do that since dinner," Evan admitted, voice low, almost a growl. "Clearly," she breathed, laughing nervously as he pulled her into a hug that felt both protective and claiming. The hours that followed were gentle but charged with intimacy, the kind that comes from months of unspoken connection suddenly given voice. They talked about everything, nothing, the weight of their confessions settling into something tender, tangible. Every word, every touch, every quiet laugh was a brick in a bridge they were finally building between themselves. By the time Aisha left his apartment, the city outside had grown quiet, snow beginning to fall in soft, lazy flakes. She paused on the steps, heart still racing. Evan caught her hand, his eyes searching hers. "Aisha," he said softly but firmly, "whatever happens, we'll figure out. Together." She nodded, words failing her. The cold air nipped at her face, but the warmth in her chest, the fire kindled between them, made everything else fade. She realized something simple, terrifying, and beautiful. She wanted him. All of him. And she was finally ready to admit it to herself, to him, and to the world. As she walked home, the snow settling on her coat, she felt it in every step, every heartbeat. This was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of everything they had been avoiding, the truth that had been simmering beneath the surface, finally allowed to break free. And she knew, without doubt, that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning air in the city was crisp, but Aisha hardly noticed it. She moved through her apartment, preparing for the weekend, her mind a whirlwind of anticipation. Today wasn't just any weekend. Evan had insisted they go somewhere special, a place tied to the memories they had carefully tucked away, the moments that had defined the turning point between them. When he arrived, there was a nervous energy about him she hadn't seen before. His suit jacket was slung over one shoulder, hair slightly disheveled from rushing, and eyes bright with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She opened the door and froze. The look on his face mirrored her own, a combination of hope, fear, and a thrill she couldn't put into words. "Ready?" he asked, voice low but steady. "Ready," she replied, though her heart was hammering so hard she thought he might hear it through the phone. The drive out of the city was quiet, filled with the occasional hum of conversation and the comfortable silences that had become theirs. The city's skyline faded behind them, replaced by rolling hills and forests glistening with early morning frost. The destination was familiar, yet somehow different in her mind. The cabin where their friendship had quietly shifted into something far more dangerous, intoxicating, and beautiful. The moment they stepped onto the cabin's grounds, nostalgia hit her like a physical wave. The same stone path, the familiar wooden railings, the scent of pine in the air. It was all exactly as she remembered. But now, everything was tinged with anticipation, the kind that made her pulse race and her stomach flutter. Evan led her toward the lake at the edge of the property, the sun just beginning to rise and paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. She took a deep breath, feeling the cold nip at her cheeks, and then looked up at him. "Do you remember the last time we were here?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling slightly, betraying his nerves. "Of course," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "The night we almost, He chuckled, but it was nervous. I've thought about that night more times than I can count. I had everything planned. I was going to tell you, finally, that I loved you. But I chickened out. Aisha's heart clenched. You? Yes. Me. And I'm not chickening out this time. He paused, taking a deep breath, then bent down to one knee in the soft grass. Her hands flew to her mouth, her heart threatening to leap from her chest. Aisha Coleman, he said, voice shaking slightly but filled with conviction. You've been my best friend, my anchor, and my inspiration. You make every day brighter, every moment better. I can't imagine my life without you in it, without your laughter, your smile, your touch. I've waited too long, been too cautious, and I can't anymore. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me? Tears pricked at her eyes, and for a moment, she could not speak. Her chest felt too full for words. She wanted to say yes, 1,000 times yes, but her emotions tumbled over one another, making it impossible to form a coherent sentence. Yes, she finally managed, voice breaking with the weight of relief and joy. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He pulled her close immediately, sliding the ring on her finger, and kissed her with a depth and intensity that spoke of months of longing, missed opportunities, and finally realized love. Her hands were tangled in his hair, her body pressed against his, as if letting go would undo all that had been built. They stood together by the lake, holding each other, the world around them fading to the gentle sounds of wind and water. This was their moment, the culmination of months of silent yearning, stolen glances, and careful dances around unspoken truths. Forever, Evan whispered against her lips. Forever, she echoed, tears streaming freely now, but happiness flooding every part of her. The days that followed were a blur of preparations, laughter, and the kind of intimacy only shared between two people who had discovered each other in the most unexpected, yet inevitable way. Friends and family celebrated their engagement, delighting in the obvious joy the couple radiated. Marina, Vicente, Rodrigo, and Sofia were ecstatic, teasing them relentlessly while secretly sharing in the happiness of a love long overdue. Their wedding, a few months later, was intimate and perfect. The same venue where they had first met was transformed into a dreamlike space, a mix of elegance and familiarity, echoing the journey they had taken together. Standing before their closest friends and family, exchanging vows that carried every whisper, every laugh, every shared secret, they were a picture of love realized. I never believed in love at first sight, Evan said in his vows, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. But the moment I saw you, I knew my life had changed forever. You're my best friend, my heart, my home. I promise to cherish you, to challenge you, and to love you endlessly. Natalie, now Aisha in this version, replied through tears, laughter shaking her voice. I never believed in fairy tales either, until a pretend boyfriend became the love of my life. Thank you for every laugh, every moment, and every perfect, chaotic memory that led us here. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was electric, filled with all the months of waiting, longing, and finally completion. Months later, they settled into the rhythm of married life. From designing a home together to quiet nights in with coffee and chocolate cake, every moment was infused with love and intention. When they learned they were expecting their first child, it felt like the universe itself was affirming the life they had built from patience, courage, and a single, daring moment of honesty. Brandon held her belly, smiling at the tiny movements, and whispered, "We made something perfect, didn't we?" Aisha leaned into him, tracing the line of his jaw. Yes, and it's just the beginning. Outside their window, the city glowed softly in the sunset, but inside, two hearts beat in tandem, proof that love, patience, and courage could create something extraordinary, something that would last forever. The journey from strangers to friends, from friends to lovers, from lovers to partners, and finally, to family, had been messy, terrifying, and beautiful. But standing there, hands entwined, hearts full, They knew one undeniable truth. They had found something worth everything, worth waiting for, worth fighting for. Forever had finally begun.